Is that a Scottish air or
No, it's by
Irish?
an American. I'll send you the information tomorrow morning.
No.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. Anyway, so welcome everybody. Tonight is going to be a bit shorter than usual because I couldn't stretch these two stories out any longer than Jung did. So we'll have more time to talk about it. And I'm realizing that this is the first time we've really spent a lot of time in the Red Book itself. We've been talking around it, leading up to it, but now you get to confront the figures, as he calls it, that Jung has confronted during these momentous times. So on December the 12th, 1913, which was the very next day after his anima scolded him for making her into a dead formula, Jung is thrust into the imaginal realm as described in chapter 5 of the Red Book, The Descent into Hell in the Future. So we examined this particular narrative in class number 3, if you'll remember. So today we're going to focus on two different chapters. This is chapter 7, Murder of the Hero. 6 days after his harrowing vision of the descent into hell, which was on December the 18th of 1913, Jung had another vision which depicted the events that preceded the fair-haired man drifting down the underground river in the descent of the hell. He called it an elaboration of the vision in the cave. So just to recall, Jung had dug down deep into the earth and then come to a spot where he could look down into a channel where there was a river of blood or whatever drifting by underneath him. And there was this blonde-haired guy face down in the water with an injury. And he was followed by a scarab. So what we need tonight are lots of readers. Hopefully we've got lots of people willing to do that. I have to share my screen with you. Just let me do that. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to ask Milton if he would start us off with number 1.
Okay. I was with a youth in the high mountains, or in high mountains. It was before daybreak. The eastern sky was already light. Then Siegfried's horn resounded over the mountains with a jubilant sound. We knew that our mortal enemy was coming. We were armed and lurked beside a narrow, rocky path to murder him. Then we saw him coming high across the mountains on a chariot made of the bones of the dead. He drove boldly and magnificently over the steep rocks and arrived at the narrow path where we waited in hiding. As he came around the turn ahead of us, we fired at the same time and he fell, slain. Thereupon I turned to flee, and a terrible rain swept down. But after this, I went through a torment unto death, and I felt certain that I must kill myself if I could not solve the riddle of the murder of the hero. Then the spirit of the depths came to me and spoke these words. The highest truth is one and the same with the absurd. This statement saved me, and like rain after a long hot spell, it swept away everything in me which was too highly tensed. I know I have stridden across the depths. Through guilt I have become a newborn. Carl Jung, Reader's Edition.
Okay. So according to a footnote to this story written by Sanusham Dasani, Siegfried is a heroic prince who appears in old German and Norse epics. And so Jack would agree to do this one, please. Number 2.
In the 12th century, he is described as follows. and in what magnificent style Siegfried rode. He bore a great spear, stout of shaft and broad of head. His handsome sword reached down to his spurs, and the fine horn with this lord carried was of the reddest gold. His wife Brunhild is tricked into revealing the only place where he could be wounded and killed. Wagner reworked these epics in the Ring of the Nibelung.
Mhm. Okay, so some of you may already know this through your own listening. You've attended concerts, maybe heard some of the original sound that Wagner has created for this story. So 12 years later, in his 1925 seminar, Jung prefaced his recounting of this vision with the following remarks. Lisa is ready to read number 3 for us.
Siegfried was not an especially sympathetic figure to me, and I don't know why my unconscious got engrossed in him. Wagner's Siegfried, especially, is exaggeratedly extroverted and at times actually ridiculous. I never liked him. Nevertheless, my dream showed him to be my hero. I could not understand the strong emotion I had with the dream.
If you want to hang on, Lisa, I'll have you read number 4 in a second.
Sure.
Jung went on to describe how he interpreted this vision at the time. So this was in 1913. Okay, at least it's number 4. I'll scroll up as I need.
Okay. The hero is the symbol of the greatest value recognized by us. Christ has been our hero when we accept the principles of his life as our own principles, or Hercules, or Mithras becomes my hero when I am determined to be as disciplined as they were. So it appeared as if Siegfried was my hero. I felt an enormous pity for him, as though I myself had been shot. I I lost my place. I must then have had a hero I did not appreciate, and it was my ideal of force and efficiency I had killed. I had killed my intellect, helped on to the deed by the personification of the collective unconscious, the little brown man with me. In other words, I deposed my superior function. The rain that fell is a symbol of the release of tension. That is, the forces of the unconscious are loosed. When this happens, the feeling of relief is engendered. The crime is expiated because as soon as the main function is deposed, there is a chance for other sides of the personality to be born into life.
Okay, thank you. So the word expiated means to make amends for or to extinguish the guilt incurred by doing something. Okay. 3 decades later, Jung said that he realized that the figure of Siegfried also represents what the German wants to achieve, to heroically impose their will and to have their own way. Where there is a will, there is a way. Remember, this vision happened 9 months before the start of World War I, in which the Germans played a leading role. He accepts that he had wanted the same thing, to impose his will and to have his own way, but that was no longer possible. The dream had showed him that the attitude demonstrated by Siegfried, the hero, no longer suited him. Therefore, it had to be killed, as he said in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Okay, so David Oak is ready for number 5, and I hope number 6 in a minute, too.
Number 5. After the deed, I felt an overpowering compassion, as though I myself had been shot, a sign of my secret identity with Siegfried, as well as of the grief a man feels when he is forced to sacrifice his ideal and conscious attitudes. This identity and my heroic idealism had to be abandoned, for there are higher things than the ego's will, and to these one must bow.
Boy. He goes on to explain 2 of the other symbols in this vision. David, I hope you're still there. Number 6.
Definitely still there. The small brown-skinned savage who accompanied me and had actually taken the initiative in the killing was an embodiment of the primitive shadow. The range showed that the tension between consciousness and the unconscious was being resolved. Although at the time I was not able to understand the meaning of the dream beyond these few hints, new forces were released in me which helped me to carry the experiment with the unconscious to a conclusion.
Okay. So he's getting a lot out of this encounter. He's saying that his superior function is being identified with Siegfried, but he's been able to kill him so that there's now space and also energy for his other functions, his non-thinking functions, to come in to replace them. So Jung's vision of the murder of the hero had enormous implications for his future life and thought. A scholar by the name of Sanford Drob highlights 4 possible meanings of Jung's vision in his 2023 publication, Reading the Red Book. Now, I had sent this out to you as a handout. The meanings of the murder of the hero. So I'm hoping that you've had a chance to read these previously because they're fairly concentrated. They're dense, right? They're a little bit tricky to pick up on. So the first possible meaning of this vision was the death of his superior function. So Jung identifies with Siegfried, speaking of him as my power, my boldness, and my pride. Therefore, the murder is a killing off of Jung's ambition and his narcissistic investment in his dominant thinking function, an aspect of himself that he regards as beautiful, but which is perhaps adverse to Jung's journey. The murder of Siegfried thus represents an opportunity for spiritual renewal, since, as he says, our gods want to be overcome so that they can be renewed within ourselves. A second possible meaning of this event is freedom from imitation. The murder of the hero symbolizes Jung's and our own existential quest to construct his and our own projects, meanings, and identity. Later in the Red Book, Jung will tell us, quote, the image of the hero was set up through the appetite for imitation. Therefore, the hero was murdered, since we have all been aping him. One of the main themes in the Red Book is that man is not redeemed through the hero, but becomes the Christ himself. And we will explore this profound idea in a later class. The third possible meaning is the overcoming of the spirit of this time. Remember that dichotomy he set up at the beginning between the spirit of this time and the spirit of the depths? Following a dream he had in 1913, Jung explained that the primitive man represented the collective unconscious over against the accepted achievements of the current age. In this way, the murder of the hero becomes an assassination of the spirit of this time by the spirit of the depths. And then fourth, it's possible to see this as a symbolic murder of Freud. The murder of Siegfried may also be understood in connection with Jung's departure from Freud as a symbolic murder of Freud. It is worth noting that while Freud had selected Jung as his successor precisely because of his Aryan qualities, to prevent psychoanalysis from being seen as a, quote, Jewish national affair, Jung murders Siegfried, who is an important symbol of Aryan consciousness. The murder of Siegfried may thus be seen as both an aggression against Freud and a displacement of that aggression onto one who is Freud's antithesis. Okay, so that's the first vision. Now we're ready for the second one, which is in chapter 9. It's called Mysterium Encounter. 3 nights after the murder of the hero vision, Jung descended into the depths once again. So this would have been December the 21st of 1913. But this time he managed to travel much deeper. So Elizabeth, I hope, is reading number 7 for me, and maybe even 8.
Sure. Yeah. The next thing that happened to me was another fantastic vision. I used the same technique of the descent, but this time I went much deeper. The first time, I should say, I reached a depth of about 1,000 feet, but this time it was a cosmic depth. It was like going to the moon, or like the feeling of a descent into empty space. First, the picture was of a crater or a ring chain of mountains. My feeling association was that of one dead, as if one self were a victim. It was the mood of the land, of the hereafter.
Okay, so here we are in the underworld now.
Mm.
In this case, he enters into a dialogue with 2 of the characters in the imaginal realm for the first time. All right, so Elizabeth, let's just move this up and we can have you read number 8 for me.
I became aware of an image. I lay in a dark depth. An old man stood before me. He looked like one of the old prophets. A black serpent lay at his feet, some distance away. I saw a house with columns. A beautiful maiden steps out of the door. She walks uncertainly, and I see that she is blind. The old man waves to me, and I follow him into the house, at the foot of the sheer wall of rock. The serpent creeps behind us. Darkness reigns inside the house. We are in a high hall with glittering walls. A bright stone the color of water lies in the background. As I look into the reflection, the images of Eve, the tree, and the serpent appear to me. After this, I catch sight of Odysseus and his journey on the high seas. Suddenly a door opens on the right onto a garden full of bright sunshine. We step outside and the old man says to me, "Do you know?"
Scroll, Mark.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm reading my own.
Yeah, okay. A garden full of bright sunshine. We step outside and the old man says to me, "Do you know where you are?"
Okay, so Jung actually painted a small portrait of these biblical features to accompany the story. So there's 2 versions of them. Here is one, and then I've zoomed in to capture the 3 of them. So here's Jung on the ground. This is the old man and the blind woman. Okay. So is it Sherry or Bill who's reading tonight?
It looks like Bill.
Okay.
So
So do you want to start with number 9 for me then, Bill?
yes, I'm just going to say I colon or just I. And
Just I.
those things. Okay. I am a stranger here and everything seems strange to me, anxious as in a dream. Who are you? E. I'm Elijah, and this is my daughter Salome.
Salome.
Salome. I, the daughter of Herod, the bloodthirsty woman. E. Why do you judge so? You see that she is blind. She is my daughter, the daughter of the prophet. I. What miracle has united you? E. It is no miracle. It was from the beginning. My wisdom and my daughter are one. I am shocked and I am incapable of grasping it.
Elijah and Salome, father and daughter. Okay. So before we read the rest of this imaginal meeting, I want to be sure we're all familiar with the background details surrounding these two biblical characters. Elijah was a 9th century BC Israelite prophet in the Old Testament. So here is a map of the of the Holy Land at that time. So according to the story in 1 Kings in the Bible, Elijah warned King Ahab of a coming drought. That was in chapter 17 of that book. He famously confronted the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel and slaughtered them in chapter 18. Fleeing from the wrath of Queen Jezebel, God revealed himself to the prophet in a still small voice in chapter 19. He condemned King Ahab for his theft of Naboth's vineyard and prophesied disaster for the house of Ahab. That's in chapter 21. After choosing Elisha as his successor, he was taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot. And that's in 2 Kings. So back to the readings. Now, Hangame, I'm going to ask you to read not just 10, but 11, but with a break in between. So 10 for now.
As Elijah and his disciple Elisha continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven.
So he's one of the few people who left this world without dying in the way that people remember him. He was very famous for this particular ascension. According to the book of Malachi, Elijah will return to earth before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. In rabbinic literature, Elijah was recognized as the forerunner of the Messiah. The New Testament Gospels record speculation that John the Baptist, who wore similar clothing to that of Elijah, was a reincarnation of that prophet. At a later date, Elijah was believed to be a partner of the Messiah who will overthrow the foundations of the heathen and bring about the resurrection of the dead. The prophet Elijah was also present in the Quran, where he is known as the prophet Ilyas, and numerous times in the Baha'i writings. So here are 3 particularly relevant passages from the Baha'i faith. Okay, Hangame, I'll let you read number 11, and then I'll pass the torch to another person.
In the holy books and sacred scriptures, there is mention of a return, but the ignorant have failed to grasp its meaning and have imagined it to refer to reincarnation. For what the prophets of God meant by return is not the return of the essence, but of the attributes. It is not the return of the manifestation himself, but of his perfections. In the gospel, it is said that John, the son of Zacharias, is Elijah. But these words is not meant the return of the rational soul and personality of Elijah in the body of John, but rather that the perfections and attributes of Elijah became plain and manifest in him. Abdul Baha, some answered questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I see that Thomas is next on the list here, so you could read maybe 12 and 13 for me without a break.
Within this most holy land, rises the mountain of God of immemorial sanctity, the vineyard of the Lord, the retreat of Elijah, whose return the Bob himself symbolizes. With the transference of the remains of the Bob, whose advent marks the return of the prophet Elijah to Mount Carmel, and their internment in the holy mount, in that holy mountain, not far from the cave of that prophet himself, the plan so gloriously envisioned by Baha'u'llah in the evening of his life had been at last executed, and the arduous labors associated with the early and tumultuous years of the ministry of the appointed center of his covenant crowned with immemorial success.
Mm-hmm. So, if you would like to know more about Elijah in the Baha'i writings, I can recommend our own Jack McLean's 2013 article called John the Baptist and Baha'i Prophetic Categories, an Atypical Paradigm. Freely available on the Baha'i Library online website, it contains 18 references to Elijah in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i faith. And I guess what I could do is just attach the PDF file to the email I send out tomorrow so that everybody has it without having to go looking for it. Some of you may find it quite interesting to read that. So now let's turn away from Elijah and talk about Salome for a minute. You may or may not know that there are two Salomes in the Bible. One is the wife of Zebedee, the mother of two of Jesus's earliest disciples, James and John. In the Gospel of Mark, she is identified as one of the three women who watched Jesus being crucified. The others were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. These same women later visit Jesus' tomb on Easter morning. The second Salome is the one in Jung's vision. This one is the infamous woman primarily remembered for the despicable scheme in which she dances for Herod Antipas and secures the execution of John the Baptist at the instigation of her mother Herodias. Because of the important role this particular Salome plays in the Red Book, we need to review the full story as provided by the Gospel of Mark. And Lori Larkin Boyle is going to read number 14 for me.
Okay. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John the Baptist, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife," as specified in Leviticus 18:16, 20, and 21. And Herodias had grudged against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Salome came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests, and the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it." And he solemnly swore to her, Whatever you ask of me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom."
So would you like to just go ahead with the 15? That is a straight continuation.
She went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" She replied, "The head of John the Baptizer." Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oath and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier to the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it on a tomb.
Okay. Kind of a gruesome story. Thank you very much. In a footnote to this story in the Red Book, Shamdasani informs us that the figure of Salome fascinated painters and writers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. His list includes Apollinaire, Flaubert, Mallarmé, Moreau, Wilde, and von Stuck. Okay, so now we're ready to return with that background in mind to the vision. So I see that it's Rob and Roxanne who are going to look at number 16 for me.
Consider
So-
this. Her blindness and my sight have made us companions through eternity. Forgive my astonishment. Am I truly in the underworld? Salome, do you love me? How can I love you? How do you come to this question? I see only one thing. You are Salome, a tiger. Your hands are stained with the blood of the Holy One. How should I love you? You will love me. I love you? Who gives you the right to such thoughts? I love you. Leave me be. I dread you, you beast. You do me wrong. Elijah is my father, and he knows the deepest mysteries. The walls of his house are made of precious stones. His wells hold healing water, and his eyes see the things of the future. And what wouldn't you give for a single look into the infinite unfolding of what is to come? Are these not worth a sin for you?
Wow. Thank you. Here we have a clear example of what Jung calls a coincidentia oppositorium in Latin, which is a unity of opposites. The unity of opposites is the philosophical idea that opposites are interconnected by the way each is defined in relation to the other. Their interdependence unites the seemingly opposed terms. The unity formed by these opposites does not require them to be identical. In this visionary narrative of Jung's, the sacred and the profane are joined, as are the archetypes of the old man and the anima, the soul. The statement that Jung is destined to love Salome suggests that he must learn to love the shadow and feminine aspects of himself. Okay, Ellen, it's time to continue the story. Number 17, please. A bit long, but take your time.
Your temptation is devilish. I long to be back in the upper world. It's dreadful here. How oppressive and heavy is the air. What do you want? The choice is yours. But I do not belong to the dead. I live in the light of day. Why should I torment myself here with Salome? Do I not have enough of my own life to deal with? You hear what Salome said. I cannot believe that you, the prophet, can recognize her as a daughter and as a companion. Is she not engendered from heinous seed? Was she not vain, greed, and criminal lust? But she loved a holy man, and shamefully she shed his precious blood. She loved the prophet who announced the new God to the world. She loved him. Do you understand that? For she is my daughter. Do you think that because she is your daughter, she loved the prophet in John the Father?
Thank you. So here Jung is struggling with Salome's vain greed and criminal lust. As the Red Book unfolds, Salome comes to represent eros, sexuality, and temptation. Yet for Jung, sexuality is far more subtle and complex than a simple biological drive. In the 7 Sermons to the Dead, which is a section near the end of the book, Jung's guide Philemon recites the following statement. The world of the gods is manifest in spirituality and in sexuality. The celestial ones appear in spirituality, the earthly in sexuality. Later in his 1925 seminar, Jung stated that sexuality and spirituality are pairs of opposites that need each other. As Shamdasani points out, near the end of his life, Jung argued that Freud had failed to understand the full numinous and spiritual significance of sexuality. Yet in his encounters with Salome in the Red Book, Jung struggles with the disturbing temptation which sexuality can bring. Okay, I need some couple more readers here. Number 18 is up for grabs. Okay, Milton, thank you very much.
Okay. E, by her love shall you know her. I, but how did she love him? You call that love? E, what else was it? I am horrified. Who wouldn't be horrified if Salome loved him? E, are you cowardly? Consider this. I and my daughter have been one since eternity. I, you pose dreadful riddles. How could it be that this unholy woman and you, the prophet of your God, could be one? E, why are you amazed? But you see it. We are together. I, what my eyes see is exactly what I cannot grasp. You, Elijah, are a prophet, the mouth of God, and she, a bloodthirsty horror. You're the symbol of the most extreme contradiction. E, we are real and not symbols.
Oh, that's a really important statement. Thank you. Here, Jung calls the relationship between Elijah the holy man and Salome a bloodthirsty horror and a symbol of the most extreme contradiction. Elijah simply replies, we are real and not symbols. This suggests to Jung that he cannot evade their significance by turning them into symbolic representations. Okay, so Jack, here's number 19 for you.
I see how the serpent rises up the tree and hides in the branches. Everything becomes gloomy and doubtful. Elijah rises. I follow and we go silently back through the hall. Doubt tears me apart. It is also unreal, and yet a part of my longing remains behind. Will I come again? Salome loves me. Do I love her? I hear wild music, a tambourine, a sultry moonlit night, the bloody staring head of the Holy One, the head of John the Baptist. Fear seizes me. I rush out. I am surrounded by the dark night. It is pitch black all around me. Who murdered the hero? Is this why Salome loves me? Do I love her, and did I therefore murder the hero? She is one with the prophet, one with John, but also one with me. Whoa, was she the hand of God? I do not love her, I fear her. Then the spirit of the depths spoke to me and said, therein you acknowledge her divine power. Must I love Salome?
What a conundrum.
Heavy stuff.
Yep. So there's one other character in this encounter that we haven't dealt with yet. And that's the black snake, who Jung later said had an affinity for him. It symbolizes the introverting libido, the introverting energy, the energy Jung was now directing inward towards the unconscious. Okay, so I see that Lisa's ready to read again, and I'm hoping you will read 20 and 21 without interruption.
Okay. Whoop.
Number 20. Whoop, you just turned yourself on.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry. Okay. The serpent is the animal, but the magical animal. There is hardly anyone whose relation to a snake is neutral. When you think of a snake, you are always in touch with racial instinct. Horses and monkeys have snake phobia, as man has. In primitive countries, you can easily see why man has acquired this instinct. So whenever a snake appears, you must think of a primordial feeling of fear. The black color goes into this feeling, and also with the subterranean character of the snake. It is hidden and therefore dangerous. As animal, it symbolizes something unconscious. It is the instinctive movement or tendency. It shows the way to the hidden treasure, or it guards the treasure. The dragon is the mythological form of the snake. The snake has a fascinating appeal, a particular attraction through fear. Some people are fascinated by this fear. Things that are awe-inspiring and dangerous have an extraordinary attraction. The serpent shows the way to hidden things and expresses the introverting libido, which leads man to go beyond the point of safety and beyond the limits of consciousness, as expressed by the deep crater.
Okay, thank you. So it's the alluring force that draws you further into the darkness, where there's something to be gained, but you don't know that when you first go on that journey. Snakes will make countless appearances in the remainder of the Red Book. The serpent, as described in the book of Genesis, leads Eve and Adam astray. And Linda's going to read 22.
As Jung puts it, the serpent leads into the kingdom of shadows, dead and wrong images, but also into the earth, into concretization. It makes things real, makes them come into being. Inasmuch as the serpent leads into the shadows, it has the function of the anima. It leads you into the depths, it connects the above and the below. The serpent is also the symbol of wisdom, speaks the wise words of the depths. It is quite chthonic, quite earthborn. The serpent is the personification of the tendency to go into the depths and to deliver oneself over to the alluring world of shadows.
Okay. So tonight we've read some of the potent exchanges Jung had with various characters in what he called his nocturnal work. He struggled to name what these were. Since they were the result of his fantasy thinking, he initially called them fantasies. But he soon expressed his dislike for this word because of the limited meaning it contained in modern usage. The problem is that a modern individual who claims, I beg your pardon, I skipped. He then considered two alternatives, imaginations and visions. The problem is that a modern individual who claims to have visions is considered to be either insane or someone using the wrong word. Unfortunately, all three of these words suffer the same limitation. They are either pathologized or trivialized in common parlance. I see Alan is ready to read our final quote tonight, number 23.
Thank you. I really prefer the term imagination to fantasy. Fantasy is merely nonsense, a phantasm, a fleeting impression, but imagination is active, purposeful, creation. A fantasy is more or less your own invention and remains on the surface of personal things and conscious expectations. But active imagination, as the term denotes, means that the images have a life of their own, and that the symbolic events develop according to their own logic. That is, of course, if your conscious reason does not interfere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So here Jung is thinking along the same lines as his contemporary Henri Corbin, whom he met in person in 1949 at the Aranos conference in Ascona, Italy. And this is what that looks like. Quite a pleasant place. It's had conferences there for, I believe, over 50 years. And Carl Jung was a major force in it being created in the first place. So in part one of this course, we learned that Corbin consciously chose the term imaginal to describe these types of interactions, to distinguish them from imaginary events. He and Jung both firmly believed in the objective reality of the imaginal realm. Let me just stop sharing and see who's here. Okay. So as I said, I had a little bit less information this time to share with you. So we've got slightly more time to talk. So I'm going to talk more about Salome and Elijah in the next class. So I wouldn't be too concerned if that's just a mystery to you. But anyway, so how are you reacting to these two stories, these two visions that I admit are challenging? Okay, Durham.
I could be out to lunch, but I thought the end of Freud, the suffering that he spent before he died, as if Carl Jung prophesied that period that's coming to his hero. But anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah, that was a very painful death. Oh, so many surgeries on his mouth. Ooh, boy. And yet Jung smoked a pipe right to the very end of his life too. So he didn't really learn that lesson, did he? Okay, so we have...
It's true.
So, what can you say? Okay, David and Belinda. Oh, Belinda. Okay, you good. There we go. We've got to turn your sound on and be... There you go.
Unmuted. Okay. Yes, this is a question that might go to one of our Arabic speaking participants. I don't know why I didn't notice this earlier. Is the name Salome a feminine version of the name Solomon or Solomon? I noticed the SLM letters in the name.
Good point. Well, Durham, what do you say about that?
Well, they're male and female names.
Mhm. But they are all related to the triliteral roots SLM, which is the same as you have in the word for peace,
Yeah.
salam.
Muslim, Islam, where
Yeah.
you see 3 letters.
Salam.
The salam, yes,
Yeah.
they all relate to peace and harmony, and so it's interesting that this rather odd woman who
Well, I can't add to this.
Pardon?
All I understand it, I mean, from Islamic studies, you know. See, Solomon is related also to justice,
Yes.
not just salam and peace.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the difference. But Salome is also was looked at in Islamic history that it's a devilish name. So it has nothing to do with peace
All the right letter.
or justice. Yeah. Anyway, that's my limited knowledge.
I also have a little theory about what was going on in that family. Herod and Salome and her mother. It would amount to the king having unacceptable feelings toward his daughter, or was she actually his stepdaughter, and the mother manipulating those feelings, because it was the mother that actually wanted the head of John the Baptist.
It certainly was.
I think we have a very incestuous dynamic going on in that family. That's just my theory.
Interesting.
I think Jung would have liked that one too.
Who?
Freud would have loved it.
Yeah, he would have.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else got a comment? Jack, yes, please.
You didn't take our hand there.
Yeah, as we learned in the readings tonight, Herodias, Salome's mother, was incensed with John the Baptist because he condemned the marriage
I did.
as being against the Leviticus law. And Elijah and John the Baptist were similar in that they were very, very fierce, outspoken critics of anything, and they didn't fear anything, especially kings. So that's why she wanted his head, because he condemned the marriage. I want to make a comment. Mark, I found all of these Jung's reading of the symbolism of the serpent very interesting as being part of the an instrument or a way of going into the unconscious. Now, the serpent has a very rich symbolism. You'll recall that in medicine, remember the serpent is enrolled around a staff because in the ancient Greek religion, Asclepius, I think that was his name.
Asclepius, I think it is.
Asclepius, okay. Yeah. The god of healing. So the snake represented healing and renewal because it sheds its skin. But then you have Jesus, and we saw this alluded to in the readings tonight. When he sent the disciples out into the world, he said, I'm sending you as sheep into a den of wolves. Therefore, be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So there you get, why is the serpent wise? Maybe because it keeps its mouth shut. It doesn't talk too much. I don't know, but it's considered because it presumably if it's not talking, it's thinking or something. So It's a very fascinating symbol that has not just one meaning, but many meanings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the Hebrew Bible, remember Moses raises up a serpent on a staff and says that who's ever bitten by the serpent will be saved. I don't know if saved is the right word, but there, obviously, the serpent's bite is not poisonous, but it's healing, right? So there it is again, the symbol of symbolism. But of course, in the book of Genesis, the snake is the tempter, right? So it has a whole bunch of fascinating different meanings, right?
Well, and it's possible to look at the story in Genesis and say to yourself, well, isn't it interesting that the snake was the one who helped humanity on its way towards consciousness by eating that apple, right? So it learned about good and evil, knowledge and ignorance, etc. So it's not necessarily a negative story. A lot of people interpret it that way, but I don't know that they've thought it through.
Yeah, you're quite right about that, Mark. Yeah, because by eating the apple, they attained the knowledge of good and evil, right?
Exactly. Okay, so Sherry and Bill, are you in Texas at the moment?
We are in Texas, but it's a state of mind, so we can escape. Um, the I'm a little bit more basic here. I'm just looking at the word soul or symbol, and we'll be remembering when you read about it's not a symbol, it's real with Elijah, I think it was that was speaking, and it made me question, well, what exactly is a symbol, and how is that different from reality? Because to me, a symbol is a graphical representation or metaphor of reality. And I'm like, what, maybe I have a wrong understanding of what a symbol is in this context, and that perhaps you could clarify it, because it seemed to me that if what could be a symbol is also can be seen as reality, then by analyzing or assessing a symbol, digging deeper into a symbol, just like with a metaphor, you discover the reality. And it looks to me like what we're doing here instead is discovering the symbols and using the reality to try to discover the symbols.
So the way I've had it explained to me somewhere in my reading over the years is that there's a big difference between metaphor or allegory and symbols. The first two are really just ways of saying the same thing with a different set of words, so that you're staying on the same level of consciousness with those two. A symbol, on the other hand, it points to another level of reality. So you're ascending through the symbol to something richer, more noumenal, as Jung would say. So that's why he's so fascinated by these things. These are ways to ascend, if you like, to divine knowledge. Whereas an allegory or a metaphor just keeps us here on Earth. I don't know if that helps in any way.
It helps a lot.
Okay. All right, Thomas, what's happening?
Well, first thing I'd like to toss out is that my reaction to the serpent in the readings, I kept thinking about the fascination or the attraction that Hitler has for young people, particularly of my generation. Hitler seemed to me to be a kind of serpent that attracted a certain element of my cultural situation when I was junior high school, high school.
Hmm.
And there was this belief that it would lead towards some kind of secret knowledge and secret information.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I think of is I have a lot of attraction and reaction to Jung. And I think part of it comes from the traditional role of the therapist who sits above the patient. The patient lies down with his head on the pillow, and the traditional role of I think this was actually that Freud started this, and the doctor is sitting behind and above the patient, so he's kind of this superior, luminous entity that kind of directs some kind of rarefied knowledge down onto the helpless patient. And that just really rankles me, because this authoritative position just it makes me upset. And so I see that sometimes with Jung assuming an authoritative interpretation. And at first I can't argue with him, because, well, that's his dream. He ought to be the one that's the authority of his own dreams. But then he wants to step outside of that and imply that what is happening in his dream has some kind of superior knowledge and information for the rest of us to gather around, and that rankles me too. So I'll just stop with that.
Well, we have a person who practiced as a Jungian therapist for many, many years. And I'm looking at Lynette right now, and I'm wondering if you would like to respond to that comment.
Oh, that's great.
Is that the way that they do things in the Jungian world? Oh. There we go.
That's not the way I know of it. And I have lived in a family of Jungian analysts, and I know the whole Jungian community since I was a child. So that's not the way I've experienced that. But I would, if you don't mind, I'd like to I had something else I wanted to talk about. Can I step outside of this?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. I spent a lot of years looking at the story of Salome and John the Baptist, and looking at all the literature and all the art and this massive amount of material.
Mm.
And one of the things I found, if you look into the kind of the descendants from Herod the First, that Herodias was one of his grandchildren, and Herodias the First, who's the big nasty guy at the top, he murdered Herodias's father and mother, and then he married Herodias to one of his other sons, and she was young. She was very young. So the first marriage she had, they were sent off to Rome to live, and then when Herod II, which is the Herod we've been talking about, went to Rome to visit his brother and fell in love with Herodias, his brother's wife, and took her back with him. So in the first case, she married because she was forced to marry by the grandfather. And in the second case, she married because she loved him. And what she was defending when she was furious with the doctrines of John the Baptist, she was furious because he wouldn't honor her love. That was very significant to me.
And when you say she married young, I mean, in those days, probably she was 12 or 13.
She was probably 13 or so when she was first married off.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been arranged.
What do you mean by honor?
Well, John the Baptist was berating Herod and Herod and Salome. No, pardon me. Herod and I've lost times. Herodias, berating them that they should not have married because she had married his brother's wife. And there was an enormous age gap between Herodias and that first marriage. So it just was very complicated from a human perspective. It was just really complicated. And I think Herodias was operating out of a very human place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge split then between the spiritual world of John the Baptist and the very ordinary world of Herodias. Anyway, that was my working over of that story.
Very interesting.
The other thing that I find really interesting in this dialogue that comes in the Red Book is that a lot of that's taken from Oscar Wilde's story of John the Baptist. And that dialogue, if you look at the script of the story from Oscar Wilde's play, which was in 1998, I think, or 1898 or 1895, that a lot of that was Oscar Wilde's version of that story and the beheading. So there's many layers to this and many sources to this.
My mom wrote a book about it.
Oh, you wrote a book about it?
No, the book, it's unpublished, but she's got a book on Salome.
I did write up everything I could find, including gathering all the art and all the literature, the poetry, masses of amount of writing and reflection on Salome.
So are you going to publish it at some point?
If I live long enough. I had just alone.
I think the tricky part is that there's huge complications. I mean, what she ran up against is a finished piece of literature, but then the huge complications of how to deal with copyright information around, including images and like artistic, photos of sculptures and paintings, and how do you get copyright permission to include those in a book? And that was just the technical side that was, she ran up against that.
That defeated me, actually.
Okay, I can understand that. Linda?
Lynette, how would you like to do a Zoom presentation on this sometime?
Wonder what that means. You mean just read it out?
Well, you have the images. We could share it's fascinating. We could share some of the images of the art pieces.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, it's just a thought as a little project.
It would be a big project, I suspect.
It's a big project, and I would need some technical help because I don't do these things very well.
Yeah, well, we could talk about it. I think it sounds fascinating.
Thank you, Linda.
It's just refreshing to hear a different interpretation of that story.
Well, there were many storytellers about Salome, and the biblical image or story is very small. It's very short, very, very brief. But then the elaboration over the years, all these different storytellers, goes off in all kinds of directions.
It tells a lot about the storytellers too, doesn't it?
Indeed, yeah.
And the aspect for what comes up is it sounds a lot like women's rights. Really, yeah. How being married off as a in the beginning of puberty, 12 or 13, as a child bride to a much older man that you don't know, you don't love, or you don't even know him, and then and being forced to all those things, and then having judgment fall on you for having a second husband. It does sound patriarchal.
Well, but she overlapped the birth of Christ, right? She was right on the cusp of that period of time, which is fascinating. And she was a child in the atmosphere of massive power, male power. It was just gargantuan at that time. From the Romans and from King Herod himself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Milton, what are you thinking about right now?
Oh, well, first, just a short observation that I find it really annoying that Herod insisted on having a wife named Herodias. It just seems like it'd be like me making sure I only married somebody named Miltonia. Anyway, I'll leave that. I find it confusing. The names are just too much the same. Yeah, my real thought here was that I thought it interesting that Salome was blind and that the choice was kind of, all she ever really did was she danced. Then the king said, "Oh, you can have this wonderful prize, anything you like." And then I think her blindness was like, was that, I'll ask, is it a symbol of her lack of discernment? Why did she go ask her mother, Herodia, what should I choose? Why didn't she ask her father, Elijah? So maybe the big mistake there is her lack of discernment, and that's maybe what the blindness is signifying. I'll leave it at
Well, well, I have to correct something there that you said. Um, the fact that she is the daughter of Elijah is something that happens in the imaginal realm. It's not something that happened in the physical world.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is Jung's private world here.
Okay. Well,
So
still, I don't
we
know who the options were. Who else, did she not have a dad? I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know anything about her other than what we've just read.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, I'm reluctant to go into any kind of detail because it's my next class,
okay.
right?
Anyway, I'll just leave it with the blindness may be symbolic of a lack of discernment. Why would you ask somebody else what should my prize be?
It has to do with Jung himself, not with her. I'll leave
Okay.
you with that.
That like
Okay.
she was only 14, and as a little girl in front of a whole court of courtiers and kings, what do you know at 14? Nothing. Sermon.
Yeah, that could be. You see, I don't know. I didn't know that really how old she was or anything. So,
Yeah.
all right, I'll leave it.
Okay. Okay, so I see David wants to get in on this. Go ahead, David. We need to, yeah, there you are.
Mute yourself. Oh, you are.
I am a
Yeah.
yeah. I think that from what I've heard, it seems to me what you have is something that happens in the physical or the visible world among humans, and there's a story, and that turns into myth.
Mm-hmm.
That myth actually becomes internalized and be, launches into the unconscious, and actually you have an archetype there, and
Yep.
it's no, it's rather interesting. I think what I was going to say, but uh, you know, as you said, the imaginal realm. I think this is very true, and but this is exactly where, in a deeper sense, that's where we humans are. Jung, really, in my opinion, with his whole analytical psychology and in the Red Book, he was exploring. He was mapping out
Mm-hmm.
the human psyche, and nobody had done that before. And I know there's Freud and Adler and so on, but nobody had really done what he did, and he felt very alone with it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important because he ends up giving the dynamics of not just of the human psyche, well, the human psyche, but of our whole inner reality, which he says that humans don't know anything about and they need to know.
Mhm.
And otherwise, we will continue, on this destructive path. And so I just wanted to mention that.
That's a very good point, though, David, about the process of becoming aware of a set of circumstances and then internalizing it.
Yeah.
And you have your own private sort of version of it, but then if other people have also been witness to it, it can become an archetype over time, where it's repeated and repeated and augmented by other similar situations, that kind of thing. So, yeah, the fact that we're talking about the imaginable realm rather than physical reality is a very important point here. Okay, Belinda, what are you going to say there?
Go back for a minute to snakes because I'm remembering that our dearly loved First Lady, Rahia Hanum, was quite fond of snakes. I don't know if you've heard the story about how she used to, her mother was entertaining some people for tea, and one of them went to the washroom only to find that there were some snakes in the bathtub because Mary was cleaning out their aquarium. And of course, the lady went screaming out of the bathroom, and that story that was current in Montreal. I heard it first from a Baha'i who's long since gone, Jim Willoughby or James Narquay, and I also encountered a lady from Montreal in 1976 or 77, a agricultural fair here in Ottawa, who actually said, "Oh yes, of course she did have the snakes. She'd been there. She was a very elderly lady at that time, and I've just kicked myself ever since that I didn't get her name and particulars so that I could actually document that." Yeah, that's a story around Montreal for a long time.
Okay, I didn't know that one. Oh, it's very interesting.
The Montreal, one of the things we either were sun worshippers or we were snake worshippers. Yeah, and I heard that from a young woman who grew up in Montreal, and I heard that in 1963.
Okay, Jack, you're being very patient. What are you going to say
not
here?
really. I've been listening and learning and being mystified by some of this. But I just wanted to add, Belinda, I heard years and years ago, that Ria Khanum also brought snakes to Davison High School, which it's now called New Helen, right?
No doubt.
And yeah, I think it was I can't remember. It was so many years ago that she brought snakes there too. But anyway, Lynette, you got me really thinking about the story again. And here's another aspect of it. John the Baptist's condemnation of the marriage. Don't forget, there are two Herod brothers were both named Herod. One was Herod Philip and the other Herod Antipas, right? He married her when the brother was still alive, you see. And that's what incensed John the Baptist, because it was specifically against Jewish law. So what you have here, if you look at it so John the Baptist's condemnation was a political act. He condemned the king just like Nathan confronted David and Elijah confronted Ahab. Here you have a prophet confronting a king and condemning a king for his behavior. So what you've got, along with the other many interesting family dynamic dimensions of this story, is you've got the rich and powerful reminds me of very modern times south of the border. The rich and powerful think they are not governed by God's laws. These apply to other people, but they don't apply to me. And John the Baptist was reminding them, yes, they do apply to you. And it doesn't matter to me if you're a king, what you're doing is wrong. And so the other thing about it is that amazes me is how the prophets didn't care about the consequences of what they did. In other words, they were prepared to accept death. They must have known. I mean, John the Baptist must have known that there would be possibly mortal consequences for publicly condemning the ruler of Galilee, and I don't know how far his reign went. But it didn't matter to him. It didn't matter that his condemnation could result in his own death. So they feared nothing. They never backed down. I mean, it's you have to wonder about this line between what is zealousness and what is I don't know. I don't want to say fanaticism. One should not say that about a prophet, but
There's another thing.
yeah.
Well, let's see what Lynette has to say in response to your comments.
Sure.
Well, I think, the comments I was making come out of my feminist sympathies, because I was really talking about Herodias, right? And that was from a perspective of a young woman, of a woman who's now married to the man she wants. Those political dynamisms of that time were so ruthless and murderous all the time. Herod the First murdered his own kids. He had about 9 different wives. He had lots of kids, and he would just murder them. He was a ruthless man, and did all kinds of expensive things in the world and all that, which was all very great. But he was ruthless, and those times were ruthless. And as for the prophet, I'm sympathetic to John, but at the same time, the whole sense of trying to balance out the spiritual ecstasies of a prophet and these simple realities of the human world. I just find that so conflicting and so almost impossible to rectify. So I appreciate your comment about that. If John is responding really to the king, he's really coming down on the king. It's more than coming down on Herodias. And Herodias is the one, of course, whose ire got up, and according to the one story. And we have to remember, there's many stories. And this was one story of how that happened. But in fact, historically, when Herod is having this party, that he's gathered this party together, at that time in history, women would not be permitted in there. That would be a male thing. The scholars have shown that was fabricated. So a lot of the story can be fabricated.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mire working through all the different versions and stories of that thing. It's very hard to know what to take.
So fortunately, we don't have to end up with a particular point of view on this story.
No, we don't.
what we're going to do is we're going to follow Jung and what he's done with it.
That's right.
Which is radically different than anything that we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah.
So that's a teaser for next time.
I don't know.
And with that, I think we're going to shut down for tonight.
No,
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated seeing everybody.
Okay,
So take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Mark.
Sleep well.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody.
I'll be in touch on Sunday. Well, tomorrow first and then on Sunday. Yeah. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Huh.